realise that the man that I've been meeting for months murdered Emma Caldwell. She came from a really nice family, and her boyfriend just said to her one day, "I've got something that can help you with your grief," and that was heroin. I get a phone call from someone I'd never spoken to before, and he said, "I understand you're looking into the Emma Caldwell case." I said, "That's right, I am." Met Ian Packer for a coffee. I've never been in the presence of somebody who has been so angry in his demeanour and his just this seething rage that would sit underneath.
I wish there was no need for part 2 of this interview, because in part 1 we talked about the investigation that resulted in Ian Packer being arrested and convicted of murder of Emma Caldwell and 33 other offences relating to 22 other victims who had been raped or assaulted. Packer was sentenced to life in prison. That's normally when police pat themselves on the back and celebrate the success. But sadly, with this investigation, I don't think it should be celebrated. It looks like mistakes were made along the way, and let's hope some lessons were learnt. There's no higher privilege in policing than investigating someone's murder, but that comes with responsibility. And if mistakes are made, then people need to be accountable. In this part, journalist Sam Poling takes us through the failings of the investigation and the lives that have been affected. Sam Poling, welcome back to I Catch Killers for part 2.
Thank you.
Look, it's just a sad investigation we're talking about, not just the murder of Emma Caldwell, but all the other women that Ian Packer, this monster, I'll call him a monster, that the rapes and the assaults and everything else that he did to all these women, and the fact that he went on for so long. I just want to make a comment up front. I think, like, from my policing career, being tasked with investigating someone's murder was an honour and a privilege, and it's something that I don't think you can get a higher honour as a cop, being put in charge of a murder investigation. But with that comes an accountability, and I've got to say, I was shocked and disappointed when I heard lines of inquiry that weren't followed up, and my reading of the reasons that they weren't followed up in regards to Ian Packer when they were concentrating on the other lines of inquiry. And I probably should put a disclaimer here, because you might not be aware of my policing career, but I was criticised on a high-profile investigation about decisions I made and things I did. And my position on that, and that was what ended my career, my position on that is that we should be accountable, and I'm calling for a public inquiry, and I want the truth to come out, because all the facts haven't come out on this matter. So I just want to address anyone that goes, well, who's this jubilant character talking about police stuffing up an investigation? But can I say this? I wish you were looking at the investigation, because I want a thorough accountability, and I would accept, if I'd done something wrong, that we learn from it, or whoever's done something wrong, learn from it. But it's too important.
Well, what I would say to that is, I'm glad you want accountability. I get asked to talk about this case all the time. Almost on a weekly basis, I get an approach. Will you do an interview? Will you do this? And I say no. I find it very difficult to talk about. It may not look it, it may not sound it, but I find it very difficult to talk about, which we may come on to the reasons why later. When you asked me to do this interview, my immediate reaction was no. The name I Catch Killers, to me, I felt there was a flippancy almost about it. And, kind of almost provocative, sensational title. I get it. That's what we do. And then I looked into your background and I thought, shit, there's so many, and with respect, similarities in terms of decisions made by senior officers which had repercussions that are untold. And I thought, so my answer is going to be no. And then I sat and listened to your podcasts. There is nothing about the William Tyrrell case that I do not know now.
Good.
I know everything about it. And I decided to say yes to this interview because I genuinely, and I've lost track of how many of your podcast episodes I've listened to, and the people that you've had on, officers, criminals, forensic psychologists, experts, you name it. And I just don't think the world realizes, I think you do, and I think some people do, but I don't think people understand the repercussions of what happens in a murder investigation. I don't think people realize the ripple effect, the damage that is caused, and the decisions that are made, the effect that they have to everybody. We are still feeling the effect of those decisions all these years later. And I wasn't even part of the investigation. And it has damaged parts of my world. It's damaged the worlds of so many people, women, victims, police officers, family members, people who were targeted, who were innocent. Their lives remain ruined today. And so I'm glad to hear you say and make that statement, because I think some people will sit and say to me, Sam, why are you doing this? Why have you said yes to this? And why have you said yes to it to a former police officer for whom there were question marks over some of his decision making? So I think, A, it's a very brave thing for you to do. B, very, well done on wanting accountability for what happened.
Well, I think it's important that there's accountability, and I have no problem with it. It saddens me. I'm the only one, other than people that have been affected by it, members of the public, that are calling for a public inquiry. I want the truth to come out. So the William Tyrrell matter, it's something that's very raw to me. I've seen lives destroyed, and I think it's been lost. And I think, like with Emma's situation, lost about the victim. It was a 3-year-old child that disappeared. Everyone should put their differences aside, and we all should be working together to find out what happened to the child. But that's leading into what we're going to talk about now. And I was, to say shocked, probably not shocked, because I've seen some bad policing in my time, but just disappointed that this type of thing could happen. And you touched on in part one that decisions were made based on ego. I see that in policing too often. I think power that comes with policing corrupts. It's in a hierarchical organisation where you're the boss and you can tell people what to do. I think that corrupts, and I think egos get bruised, and we should put egos aside, and the most important thing are victims. But look, it's not about my journey, but thank you for saying that, and I'm glad I raised it, because it was the elephant in the room. I probably should have raised it at the start, but I wanted to put it out there, and I invite scrutiny on everything that I've done in policing. Getting back to, we're going to talk about the trial towards the end, but more importantly, the type of information. So after a point in time, a police officer got in contact with you. You kept looking into the investigation, and the police officer was Stuart Hall that got in contact with you. I think it was a text in 2023. And do you want to talk us about what Stuart Hall said to you, who he is and how he fits into the investigation?
Yeah, so by this point, Ian Pack has been arrested and charged with multiple offences, right? So he's arrested and he's charged with 46 offences, 28 victims. There's a charge of murder, rape, sexual assault, abduction. So the case is now live, right? This is active. So I'm having to be very, very careful as to who I can talk to and what they can tell me, etc. And it's likely that these people are going to be witnesses. It's likely I'm going to be a witness. So it's very, very difficult to try and get people to talk to me. And I had heard of a man called Stuart Hall. He was a detective constable in the investigation which looked into Emma's murder. So there were two investigations, the overt investigation, which was the murder investigation into Emma, and then there was a covert inquiry, which was looking into these Turkish men. And Stuart Hall was on the overt inquiry looking into Emma's murder. And I had met with the family liaison officer for the Caldwell family, and he was telling me all about his work. And it was only as we left, and I was just actually about to get in my car when he said to me, listen, you've got to talk to Cable Guy. And I was like, who's Cable Guy? And he said, Stuart Hall. He's Cable Guy. He knows everything about the case. And I was like, well, I'd heard of Stuart Hall. I'd seen his name on statements, but I didn't know anything more than that. So I tried to get hold of him. He was still serving. And I was like, okay, fine. And then word came to me, Stuart will never talk to you. He's not in a great place, doesn't want to talk. He's now just retired. He'll never talk to you. And then one day, my phone goes and it's a text from, it was a Facebook Messenger text, and the profile just said Stuart Hall, and it just said TV Sam Poling. And I messaged back, please tell me you are who I think you are. Because, I mean, he was gold to me. If he knew who if he knew who the killer was back in 2005 and the police let him go, what? How? Why?
Yeah.
He was the key for me. And I remember driving on the motorway, leaving this voice note saying, look, you need to be the Stuart Hall that I'm looking for. And he agreed to meet with me. And I met with him and he said, I will never go public. I will never tell you my story. It's damaged me all these years. It destroyed me. But he agreed to tell me his story. And his story basically is he is brought in on the investigation. He was brought in a few weeks after the murder. And he's taken into the production room on day one, right? Day one of him being on this murder investigation. Yep. And you will have this, and I'm sure in your investigations, in the production room, they have photos on the wall of all the exhibits and the body and the murder weapon and
evidence,
whatever.
Yep.
And he sees a piece of cable and he looks at the cable and he says, what's that? And they said, well, that was found around Emma's neck. Oh, right, okay. And he recognizes the cable. And he says, that's a speaker cable, but it's weird because it's burned at the ends. And speaker cable doesn't burn because not enough voltage goes through speaker cable. And he's thinking to himself, that's been used in a sign, and I'll bet you that's been used in a neon sign, because Stuart Hall, prior to becoming a police officer, was a neon sign maker, right?
Right.
So
Okay,
he knew everything about neon signs.
Yeah.
Well, he then goes out and speaks to a woman, and she says, I was raped by a guy in a van. And he says, yeah, okay, but do you know anything about the Emma Caldwell murder? Well, no, I don't, but there was a man in a van, and he raped Emma, and he also abducted a friend of mine, and this man's really important. Well, do you remember his name or the registration? No, but I remember the sign on his van looked like it had red, yellow and blue stripes on or something, like he was a painter or decorator, something like that. That night, a van is stopped in the city centre of Glasgow, and by cops doing, look, stop and, do you know anything? Have you seen this missing woman? And have you, do you know anything about this woman? And this guy in the van says, don't know anything about it, don't use these women, don't like prostitutes. He's really derogatory about them. And he says, but, take my number, you've got my details. And they say, that's fine. And it comes through on the radio that a man in a van has been stopped who's used disparaging language about the women, and the van that he's driving is a neon sign erecting van. Stuart Hall hears this, thinks, what a coincidence. So here he gets the task to go and speak to Ian Packer, and he is the first cop to go and speak to Ian Packer. And he interviews him as a witness, right? So there's no rights being read. He's not cautioned. He's just a witness. And he comes out that first interview and he says, it's him. He did it. I know he did it. I will bet my life he did it. And Stuart Hall slowly starts to build up the picture about Packer. Women who describe Packer. Stuart Hall takes a photograph, a Polaroid photograph of Stuart Hall that day. And he goes around a number of women. and say, you know, the guy who attacked you, can you pick him out in this photo book? And he shows them photo books, and one after the other signs their name next to Ian Packer's photograph, right? Repeatedly. He then meets a woman called Pauline, and Pauline says, I had a client, and he got really angry one day, and he took me down to a wooded area. It's about an hour's drive, I would say. And when I wouldn't strip, he got really aggressive and he terrified me and he forced me to strip. And, you know, he had sex with me. And what she described was rape. And Stuart Hall says, okay, wow, will you show us where the wooded area is? And she said, no, I'm dreadful with maps. I don't know maps. But I remember landmarks, because to survive as a prostitute, when a client takes you away somewhere, you have to remember landmarks in case you have to escape or they abandon you. So she describes down the motorway, left at this roundabout, left at the house that's got 4 chimneys that she wanted to live in, left at the pallet yard, right at the white cottage, get to the silver gate, and you stop in a turning circle in the middle of a forest. So Stuart Hall picks her up with his police colleague, and they follow the landmarks like a kind of Hansel and Gretel trail of breadcrumbs. Yeah. And they are slowly heading down the motorway down towards England. They turn off to the same landmarks that they had seen before when they had gone down to visit the deposition site where Emma's body was found. And lo and behold, they arrive at where Emma's body was found. And that's the moment that they realise it's Ian Packer. She signs her name. She says, that's the man. This is the location that he brought me. And that's the moment that that Stuart Hall says, well, I always knew beforehand that he did it, but this is it. So,
see, at that point in time, I would be thinking, they're red flags or further than red flags. That's you'd beyond, be going, okay.
Beyond red flags. You know, they have a man who admits to knowing Emma, admits to paying Emma for sex, admits to taking Emma, in his statement, 6 times to a wooded area, who then describes taking a woman to the same wooded area and describes the woman. Well, that woman was Pauline. We then have Pauline taking other police officers, Stuart Hall, down to the location where she says she was taken, which is the same place that Ian Packer's saying. So everything slowly in that moment just fits. And Stuart Hall says, okay, we've got to arrest him. That's it. So he reports it in, and he says, I need to speak to the boss man. And they said, well, you need to phone the SIO. And he does. He phones the SIO, and he says, he's taken us down to the woods. We're down at the woods. He's taken us to the deposition site. And he's told, let him go. He's not our man. Release him.
So this is the SIO, the Senior Investigating Officer, so at the rank of Superintendent, in charge of the whole investigation, overseeing the investigation. And so he's told to let him go. He's not a suspect.
He's not our man. Let him go.
And you've got Stuart Hall, but boss, this.
Yeah. So word has got back to the police station that this has happened, and you know, officers are like, well, this is going to be great because you know, we've got our man. Stuart Hall goes back. He's all excited. I mean, he said, we were so excited. We knew we'd got him.
Yeah,
and then to
that's
be told,
breakthrough. That's a huge breakthrough.
And then to be told, no, release him. You are not to charge him, not to be arrested. Let him go. And he's like, shit, you know. And then not long after that, he carries on talking to women. He carries on showing the police photo book. More women identify Ian Packer. More women talk about being raped. More women talk about being sexually assaulted and abducted. And Stuart Hall's got this massive, massive picture. He gets Packer back in again. He interviews Packer 3 times. And each time he's like, it's just him. It's him. So by this point, Ian Packer, right, in those 3 interviews with Stuart Hall, has said, I don't know Emma. I don't use prostitutes. That's interview number 1. Well, we know that that's a lie, right? So Stuart Hall gets him back in a second time. And the interviews go, and you can see them go from, I don't use prostitutes, never paid for sex, don't know Emma. Oh, okay. I mean, I maybe have used prostitutes, but I definitely don't know Emma. To, okay, I used prostitutes and I did know Emma and I did pay her for sex. Right the way up to, she was my favourite, I would look out for her every single time, and I took her here, there and everywhere. So you can see it slowly unfolding, and Stuart Hall can see this slowly unfolding. He's taken off that inquiry. And then But they have what, and I don't know what you would call it in your world, but over here they're called TIEs, trace, interview, and eliminate. Make sure that you shut every single door, eliminate everybody. If you cannot shut that door, they stay in the inquiry.
Yeah.
Well, Ian Packer, remember, they're still going after the Turkish men, so there's a problem because Ian Packer's still a problem in this inquiry because that door has not been shut because they need for him to say, okay, yeah, I know Emma, I've been with Emma, but by this point, there's only been 3 statements given. He hasn't admitted this. So they get told, these cops, other officers, get told, bring Ian Packer back in for a statement. But it's not to be Stuart Hall. So this other cop, David Barr, brings him in.
David Barr, is it?
Yeah, David Barr.
Yep.
Amazing cop. And when you see the statement that he gets off when you see the statement that Davy Barr gets off Ian Packer, it's incredible. I mean, it's pages and pages and pages. And Ian Packer breaks like that, just in the middle of this interview, and he starts crying, and he says, yeah, okay, I did know Emma, and I have taken her to the woods, and I've taken other women to the woods, and I took Emma there 6 times, and she was the first, and that's the moment that it breaks. And Davy Barr's like, oh, this is absolutely incredible. Problem is that as Davy says, the senior officer had said to Davy, get Ian Packer in for a statement, TIE him, trace him, interview him, and eliminate him. That's all you need to do. We need him out of this inquiry. So he's told, bring him in. And then Davy says he's told, but he is not a suspect in this inquiry. He's not our man. He's not a suspect in this inquiry. Whatever he says, doesn't matter what he tells you, doesn't matter what he says, he's not a suspect in this inquiry. And Davy said, and said to me, I was so angry at that because basically what I felt I was being told was don't do your job. And he said I was going to go in there and do my job. And if he was a suspect in this inquiry, he's going to be a suspect in this inquiry.
It got to the point during, and I think that statement you were talking, it was 27 pages long. Yep. So a detailed statement from him. And at this point in time, he's in as still a witness. Hasn't been formally entered into custody or his rights provided.
Yep.
And my understanding is, so David's been given those instructions, because I had to listen to that part backwards and forwards, listening to your podcast, because I'm thinking, no, this can't have happened. But then David's, during the course of this, and I can't eliminate this bloke. Yep. He's virtually giving himself up in the details. And then he phones the boss, the SIO, and says, look, I want to enter him into custody and declare him a suspect and all the cautions and protections that come into place there. And he was told not to. And on the reading, if I remember this right, the statements go on detail, and then it gets to about page 26 where you just get into the juicy bits, and then it just basically stops. Oh, well, that's all I know. I didn't murder Emma Caldwell.
Yes.
Which
it
gives a ring of truth to what David is saying.
And actually I think that's the 6th statement that bit happens, if I remember rightly. What happens is Packer admits to taking Emma to some woods. He admits to taking lots of women to some woods. He admits to taking Pauline to some woods. He admits to the rape of Emma behind the billboards. He admits to all of this stuff. And then Davy, they still need to eliminate him by showing where these woods are. So he gets Packer back and says, will you show us and take us to these woods that you're talking about? They pick him up, I think 5 o'clock one morning, they pick him up, and Davy says, they say to Packer, which way, left or right? And every junction, which way, left or right? And Packer goes, left here, right here. And he tried to play silly games at the beginning, going, oh, right, left, and they're thinking, right, okay, he's taking us on this merry dance, around the countryside. And eventually they say to him, stop playing games, left or right? And he goes, right. And they turn up at the woods, the same woods where Emma's body was found. And that's when he knows that he already knew it was Ian Packer. He knew that from the previous statements. He knew that from Stuart Hall's statements. He knew that because Pauline had given the statement and identified Packer and taken Stuart Hall to the woods. And so Davy says he phones up the road or takes Packer up the road and speaks to senior officers, and he's told the same thing. I've told you, Davey, he'll no longer be. He will not be a suspect in this inquiry. He is not a suspect in this inquiry. Let him go. And on the statements, you can see he's just basically he's gone. That's it. Packer is never spoken to again by that inquiry, ever.
Yeah. Like, and it sounds far-fetched, but I think you've supported it in part with, there's also Detective Sergeant Willie Mason that is corroborating what David Barr's saying, also fits into what Stuart Hall says. So I'm sitting here and thinking, why? Yeah, why?
Okay, so I have to be fair to the police, right? I mean, look, I'm impartial, but I have to be fair to the police in their initial inquiry. The last phone call was to a Turkish man. The ping of the mobile phone was outside a Turkish cafe. Evidence of rapes and sexual assaults being taken place inside that cafe were being given to the police. And Emma's blood is found in that cafe on this quilt, right? Aside from the translations, lose these ridiculous interpretations from the hidden bugs. Those points of fact alone would have been enough, I think, for anyone to go, oh, right, okay, well, this is a good lead and these are good, strong suspects.
It's understandable.
Right. The second, Emma by that point was an injecting drug user. And remember, she'd been strangled, right? This wasn't a bloody murder. There were no blood forensics. She was strangled, okay? So the blood, you could discount, the pinging of the mobile phone. So I understand why they went down the road for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
But the problem was that the two inquiries did not seem to be talking to each other. So, the Packer inquiry are going, oh, God, it must be Ian Packer. Well, but they discovered this covert inquiries ongoing. They must have something amazing. So they're in the dark. These cops are in the dark. The junior cops, the detectives on the street, the constables going, well, we think it's Ian Packer, but they've got something amazing apparently. So it must be better than what we've got. And you've listened to the podcast. I remember saying to Davey, why were you not screaming this from the rooftops, right? I would. I'm not a cop, right? And I don't understand hierarchy.
I can answer that for you, Sam, because I have screamed many a time from the rooftops to people above me, and this is why I'm doing the podcast now instead of
I don't understand.
still
I'll never
working.
understand it. I'll never understand. I will never understand the world you worked in that creates an environment where someone like Davy Barr, someone like Stuart Hall, just goes, okay, well, I'll just shut up now because that's the hierarchy. Every opinion is valid. Every opinion should be equal. And had they listened to these guys, Ian Packer would have been caught back in 2005. What we discovered, remember, we started to speak to women, and I tracked down women who said, bearing in mind it's coming up to the trial at this point. Yeah. And I started to track down women who said, look, I was also raped by Ian Packer. I was abducted by Ian Packer. And I'd be like, tell me what happened. Well, he would pick me up in his van, and it was a white van. And I remember sitting thinking, no, hold on a minute, his van's blue. Oh, what are you talking about? And I spoke to another woman. She said, he picked me up and he raped me, and it was, in his white van. And I'm like, but his van was blue. And then I found a receipt for the sale of his van and the purchase of another van. And it was just a few weeks before Emma died, before Emma was murdered. Yeah. Right? He had changed vans. Now, I spoke to that many women that you would either have to assume that Ian Packer spent nearly every day in the couple of weeks before Emma was murdered, picking up women, taking them to locations, assaulting them, sexually assaulting them, raping them, abducting them, because they were describing a different colour van. They were describing the new van. Or he committed those offences after Emma was murdered. And then when I started to drill down into the dates. They were telling me that this was happening in 2011 and 13 and 15 and 17. So Emma was murdered in 2005. The police officers were shouting quietly that it was Ian Packer in 2005. They weren't being heard. Actually, it was worse than that. They were shut down. right? It wasn't that they weren't hurt; they were shut down.
I'm getting a sense of the type of person it would embolden him, and the arrogance he had, like coming to speak to you.
Look,
why wouldn't he think he could bluff his way through things?
I know 2 women that I have spoken to. I have met. I am in touch with them now, still.
Yep.
They were taken to the woods where Emma was murdered in the years after Emma was murdered. One of the women was taken there in the months after Emma was murdered. That tells you what this man thought.
I'd say no, I won't say unbelievable because I believe it. And just on the issue with David Barr and Stuart Hall, in the sentencing, the judge made a comment, and I think you can pull something out from that because I was looking at it. Okay, this is what I've heard on your podcast, and you backed it up very well because you've left a supportive trail with the evidence of Detective Sergeant Willie Mason, but also the judge's comment, the vital work, and this is on sentencing the Packer after he's convicted of all these crimes. The vital work of retired Detective Stuart Hall and David Barr has stood the test of time. So clearly, when it went to trial, the judge is looking at the evidence that they've presented, and the judge has seen it for what it is. So I think that's supportive of what they've said.
Yeah, and Stuart Hall, I think Stuart Hall was a witness. He was called up and recalled, I think, 6 times.
That's an incredible amount of time.
Unheard of, right? I mean, like totally unheard of. But because he'd been so involved, and the sad thing is that many of the women who he'd taken statements from back in 2005, 6 and 7, they'd died, right? So he was having to be their voices. And he was also having to talk to his interviews with Packer, and he was having to talk to the evidence that he'd gathered and the journey to the woods with Pauline, who's also since died. And so he was recalled many times. And, I mean, Stuart Hall... Yeah, I mean, just honesty personified. Incredible. The kind of cop that you want on an investigation into the murder of a loved one, rigorous. Davy Barr just doesn't take any nonsense. Just, he's going to go for it. And the 2 of them, I will never, ever, and honestly, anybody listening to this is in 2 minds about going to a journalist or telling their story about a journalist. Choose your journalist wisely, firstly. But secondly, just... open yourselves up to them. Davy Barr and Stuart Hall put their absolute trust and faith in me. They didn't know me. They didn't have to do that. And I will never be able to thank them enough, ever, for what their testimony allowed us to do. And it convicted Packer, right? Between us, but it's them. They convicted Packer. And, the judge had it right.
Yeah, well, the judge also made a comment in regards to yourself at sentencing. Credit too goes to investigative journalists, notably Sam Poling, who shone a light on your activities. So this is him talking to Packer. So look, I'd say it feels sweet, but it doesn't because there's such a horrible crime. And you talked about it. How many crimes were committed after this when police had missed the opportunity? Because that's part of the pressure when you're investigating a homicide as well. There's not a lot of serial killers we chase, but you've always got to consider that. And if someone does get away with murder or a serious offence and you're not doing your job and that person is out on the street, there's other potential victims. And it looks in this case, in that period of time, that other women were assaulted by him.
Oh, I mean, he had taken his MO, right? His MO was the streets of Glasgow. His prey were young, vulnerable girls, right? I mean, I use the word women, but they were so young. The first rape that we knew of was a 15-year-old girl who was the sister of his girlfriend at the time. And it just moved on to women who worked on the streets. He was obsessed with pornography, obsessed with prostitutes. And then in the latter years, we discovered he had then, with the sex has gone online, sex has gone into private sex clubs, and he was frequenting sex clubs, and there were victims there. I mean, I think had he not been caught when he was, although at 19 years too late, he would have carried on. I think everybody is of that opinion. He would have just carried on. It's untold number of victims. I know women that still haven't reported it who are victims of his.
And that brings in another aspect that it came out in the story in the podcast, that the way that women were treated when they reported these crimes to police, and sort of a misogynistic environment where, well, you're a working girl, how can you be raped? It's that type of thing, and their reports weren't taken seriously. Is that something that you saw, and something that came about?
Yeah, I mean, the amount of, in fact, a huge number of the girls who were reporting being raped by clients. There was a book at a drop-in centre, which was a support place for women who were working in prostitution, and they had what they called the Beware book, people to beware of, and Ian Packer's name is in there. It was in there repeatedly. There was police street worker liaison officers going in, and they saw the book. Nothing's happened. Yeah. And the way that the women were treated by the police was appalling. And the police have since apologised. They apologised on the day of the verdict for the way women were treated. Too little too late for these women.
The trial, how long did the trial run for? And you had to give evidence at the trial. You became, talk about getting involved, you became a witness in the matter, a key witness in the matter. How was that experience for you?
It was horrific. The trial was over 5 weeks, and I was told that I was being saved for the end because it was part of the key witness were the interviews that I'd done with him and what we'd found out. And so I wasn't allowed to attend the trial, which was hard after 6 years of working on this investigation to not be there. And so I appeared in the last couple of weeks of the prosecution case. And it was honestly, utterly horrific. I mean, horrific in ways that I never anticipated it would be horrific. But yeah, it was basically showing excerpts from the interviews that were done, both of the interviews, and then the prosecution, very cleverly pulling apart Packer's lies, because he would deny doing one thing, or women were describing him as, oh, well, on the day that he raped me, he turned up at this brothel and he was wearing motorbike gear, and Packer was telling the police, well, I didn't have a motorbike till I was 20, whatever. And then we've got bits of me and him talking about motorbikes and all his bikes on camera and, all this kind of stuff. So, and all the lies that he was telling. So sometimes he was lying to me and telling the police the truth, and other times he was telling me the truth and lying to the police. And so it was tough, very tough.
And from... Like you're saying, it's tough, and I think anyone that says it's not hard being in the witness box, hasn't given it the due respect it deserves to start with, because it is an intimidating place to be, and to find yourself, you've been reporting on stuff, and for you to say it's tough because you've done some pretty heavy stuff in previous inquiries and investigations that you've done. What was it about? Was it all the emotion? Like you've been hanging out with the person that's been accused of these crimes. You've spoken to the victims. You're carrying a lot of emotional baggage when you're going in there, and then it gets broken down to a very analytical attack on your credibility and different things. What was it about about your experience giving evidence that you found so difficult?
I mean, I've given evidence before. I mean, my career has been as an investigative journalist. My passion is investigating criminals, serious and organised crime. I've given evidence in court several times before. That doesn't faze me. I don't get anxious about that. This was different because I knew everybody involved in this. I wasn't friends with Ian Packer. Don't never think that. But he was a contact. But I spent more time with him than I have done some of my colleagues that work in the same unit as me. We spent hours talking about things. And then suddenly to realise that I felt a certain level of responsibility and guilt about the fact that there he is sitting in the dock. Now, yes, it was down to his behaviour, but I felt like I had enticed the fox, and it was difficult. I knew I'd got to know all the women. I mean, you don't just get to know women. You really get to know the women. I knew their families. I know their kids' names, their kids' birthdays. I would drop off Easter eggs. I would take them to go and pick up their hospital appointments, and that, you just really invest. You've got a duty of care for all of these women, and so there was such a weight of responsibility that I felt that if this case failed and if he didn't get guilty, even on one of the charges. That would be me. That would be on me. And the reason I felt that was because throughout the trial, my name came up over and over and over. I would get texts from people saying, "You're getting it hard in court today." I wasn't even there, hadn't even given evidence. But it was basically he said, she said. Packer says this, well, Sam Polling's lying. This woman says that, well, Sam Polling persuaded her to. Well, that woman's given this account. That's because Sam Polling manipulated it. Well, this woman told this to the police. That's because Sam Polling drove her to the police station to give her statement. This went on and on and on. And then when eventually Packer incredibly gave evidence, I mean, he was on the stand for nearly 4 days, it was his evidence was about me and about I was a lie. Well, Sam Polling manipulated him. Well, she told me to say that. Well, she's lying. And it's like, this isn't about me. But suddenly it became about me. And it got to the point I had to walk out on the third day of him giving evidence. I couldn't. It was utterly horrific. It was the most brutal thing that I've watched. And to hear my name in his mouth constantly. And when I took the stand, before that, when I took the stand, and he would not look at me. Would not look at me, and that was the first time I'd seen him since after the second interview, and he didn't look at me. And then when the prosecution sat down and the defence stood up, and then at that point Packer kind of turns and just looks at me with this big smug look on his face, as if to say, right, now you're going to get it because my guy's up, you know. It was horrific. I mean, it was honestly horrific, and everything was about my reputation and my honesty. And I've worked so hard my entire career. This is the bit I find difficult to talk about. I've worked so hard my entire career in all the investigations that I've done, and I've done them honestly and with integrity. And I've always treated everybody that I've come into contact with dignity and decency and kindness and empathy and everything. And to sit there and not only for me to listen to my integrity being questioned, but for my family to read about it in the newspapers, for my colleagues to listen to that. It got to the point where, and I still can't stand the sound of my own name. When you read that statement out, that the judge, I just can't stand seeing my name. I can't stand hearing my name. I can't watch the Packer interviews. I can't stand his voice. And I think that's because of having my integrity questioned the way it was. But I also think I suffer from the worst guilt for everybody. Guilt that not everybody got a guilty verdict for their charges. And that's on me. I take that as my fault. Because some of the ones that got not guilty were some of the women that were later victims who I had said go to the police. And I think I'd manipulated, I'd lied. I have guilt that there is a man serving 36 years in prison where he deserves to be, but he had kids and they didn't deserve this. He has a mum and a dad. He has siblings. None of them did this. And these women, one of the women, and just finally about this bit, one of the women who I was incredibly close with, who was amazing, and she took part, she's Yvonne in the documentary. She's just absolutely incredible. And, you know, me coming into her life and asking her to tell me her story has destroyed her. She slept the night before giving evidence in a car park because she's now homeless again. And she had got her life together. She had a little boy, you know, and she's lost everything. And to know that's on me. I feel that's on me. And that's a really difficult place to sit here today. And that's why I don't like talking about this case, because I feel the weight of everybody's lives and the damage that they're going through. Had I not done what I did, had I not been digging and investigating and got Packer involved and all of this stuff, their lives would have just carried on because time has passed. It was a cold case. It was forgotten about. But Emma needs justice, and she needed justice, and Margaret needed to know what happened to her little girl. So it's a very difficult, difficult place to be. And it's not about me. I'm not saying this is about me. It's about all the women. But I see Stuart Hall, and I talk to him all the time, and I see the damage that it's caused officers, good officers, women who were victims. And Emma's family, you know, they haven't got have they got justice? Have they got peace? No. Not at all. It's difficult.
Sam, I am so sorry we're bringing this up, but sorry
Yeah.
I'm saying, and I'm in a position to say, because I do understand what you're talking about. Everything you've mentioned there, I understand. I can relate to aspects of what you're saying there, but you're being very hard on yourself. That is, sadly, and coming back to what we started this part, there's a responsibility and accountability when you're investigating murders, and it does cause damage. And I've said that, and I've had to reflect sometimes on. I'd get home, and you feel like you've just run a wrecking ball through all these people. And I'm in touch with plenty of people that unsolved homicides, and I try not to give false hope, but I steer them in directions to this day. And I sometimes question myself, why don't we just let it
Yeah.
pass
Let
by?
it be.
But what I'm strengthened from, with all these people that I speak to and the people I've dealt with when in my policing career and people I'm speaking to now, they can't let it be. Like, it's the damage is done by the person that does the crime. That's where the damage is done, and they're the sole people to be blamed. Can I say this? If you didn't do, I'm trying to be wise, and I can help you here. If you didn't do what you did, there would have been more people suffering.
Absolutely.
And you've seen like Margaret and Willie, Emma's parents, the pain that they've gone through. You've seen the girls that have been victims where people don't believe them. I think you've done more good than you've done caused damage in the people that you've helped, and it's about getting justice. Justice doesn't bring closure anytime. Like, you're naive if you think, okay, well, once they're found guilty, everyone's going to go out and celebrate. It doesn't work that way in when you're looking at murder. It's just a horrible thing.
I guess you're the experienced one in this. You knew that. You know that it doesn't bring closure. I kind of thought it might for some people.
Yeah.
I didn't realise, and I goes back to my point I made at the beginning of this part of this, the second part of this chat, which is, I want people to know that the ripple effect. It's bigger. It's wider. It's so much more damaging than people will ever know. It doesn't stop with a guilty verdict. It doesn't stop with an arrest. It doesn't stop with a guilty verdict. It doesn't stop with a sentence. It doesn't stop. It just does not stop. I think so many lessons need to be learned from what happened in this case. I would urge everybody to please listen to this podcast. And I just, I know that the majority of your guests are from law enforcement or in that world. Take lessons from this, learn from this, really.
Yeah. Well, I try to be selective with the people I get from law enforcement. They're the people I look up to and the people I respect. And what comes out in bucket loads from you is you've got empathy for all the people involved.
Yeah.
All the great detectives I know, the ones I looked up to, the ones I tried to aspire to be, all carried that empathy. What's the most important characteristic? You talk Stuart Hall, I could just hear it in his voice, what a decent person he was, listening to your podcast.
Yeah.
Great police, and they're butting heads with an organisation that's why I like what we talked about at the start with police being more accountable, because gone are the days where they can just rule the roost and nothing to see here, ma'am. The police are got this all underhand. Just move along. Those days are gone, and people need to be accountable. Some good has come out of this, and I've got some comments from the judge, but I think you've encapsulated what we're talking about here, and also the family's lawyer. Just one of the comments. This is a quote from Emma's family lawyer after the court matter. The family's lawyer, Emma Caldwell, described Packer as being one of UK's worst sex offenders and called for a robust, judge-led public inquiry into the original police investigation, adding that some officers had blood on their hands. Okay, that's a solicitor. They're always prone to make the big statements. But reading between the lines, it's all about accountability. And I think with this, we do need to be accountable.
Yeah, and I obviously approached the police officers who were responsible for the decision making, including the SIO
Yep.
of the entire case, but also the senior officer for the covert investigation against the Turkish men. Neither
Yep.
of them would give me interviews. The statements that I got basically were, we await the public inquiry, and the SIO said, was looking forward to telling his side of the story at the public inquiry. I look forward to that too. Everybody is looking forward to that inquiry.
Well, there is always two sides, and I think you balanced it out with the not just straight out criticism. There were reasons that the Turkish men were being looked at, but in the same regards, I'm just saying from a homicide detective, the bit of information I've got, that it was pretty strong on Packer, and it should have been pursued to the nth degree.
Sorry, Gary. I really want to say, I'm not amazing. I'm not this magical investigative journalist that just managed to get all of this evidence right and just do the most brilliant job. The evidence was there, right? The evidence was all there. I'd love to be able to say it was me. The evidence was there. It was there, okay?
You just pulled the curtain back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I think the police, I'd like to think the police have learned from this and from lessons learned. And I think the Scottish police has apologised for the original inquiry was handled. But that was then, it was run by Strathclyde Police, which no longer they've been taken over by Scottish Police. It's just a restructure, is it?
Yeah, so basically there were regional area police forces, and that became one single national force, Police Scotland. So, yeah.
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 We've also got a quote that attributed to Police Scotland. Emma Caldwell, her family and many other victims were let down by policing in 2005. For that, we're very sorry, the force said. I've had a police commissioner come up and apologise to an Indigenous community about a way an investigation into a serial killer was handled. And it took 10 years to get the commissioner up there, came up there and said, look, we're sorry, we could have done things better. It doesn't solve the problem, it doesn't fix the problem, but it means something, at least when they acknowledge. And there was also Deputy Chief Constable Beck Smith, who's the crime portfolio for Scotland Police. She's also made comments. I heard towards the end of the podcast of changes that have been made and things that they're improving on. Do you believe that they come into play?
Yeah, look, I think it's a different world. I think the world has changed, and I think the way that the police deal with victims of sexual offending has changed. I think the way that police deal with women who work within the sex trade and work as prostitutes, I think that is changing. And I think there is perhaps a kind of more of a holistic approach in terms of law enforcement and all the agencies perhaps working together. Are we ever going to change attitudes towards women like this? No, I don't think so. I think there will always be some of those voices, disrespectful, disparaging, unpleasant attitudes, archaic attitudes that have got absolutely no place in today's society, but they will always be there. I think they're getting fewer.
Yeah. Well, there's always room for improvement. Yeah. Ian Packer ended up getting 30 or life imprisonment, which is a minimum of 36 years for the murder of Emma Caldwell, and I think also was it 33 other offences for 22 other victims.
Yeah, he got 36 years for Emma's murder, minimum before parole, and 22 other victims. He got 28 years to serve concurrently. So the minimum before he can get parole is 36 years. He will undoubtedly die in prison.
Yeah. What a journey that you found yourself involved in. Have you got any other projects going at the moment, or are you just taking a step back and go, whoa? You can't see that kid's still involved. That teenage girl that kept hassling the BBC for a job is still there. But
yeah, always.
Look, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and I appreciate your due diligence. And I catch killers. You're the first person that's said about the name. I sit here sometimes and think, it started. I didn't know what I was in
Yeah.
for, and we're stuck with it. But I'd like to think that the work that we do on the podcast here, having people like yourself, and make people, like if police are listening to this, is not about bashing police. It's about lessons learnt. And why was a mistake made? If a mistake was made, what lessons have we learnt from that to prevent that type of thing? And I would, as this wise old ex-homicide detective, just say to you, be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
What you did is tremendous. It's something you should be very proud of. And there's always gonna be collateral damage when you go hard finding out the truth of why someone's life's been taken.
Thank you. I appreciate the words. I do.
Thanks very much. All the best for the future.
Thank you.